My name is Edith Wilson, 65 years old, and last week I retired after 4 decades of teaching elementary school. I sold my house and moved in with my son Bradley, thinking my golden years would be filled with family time. This morning over breakfast, Bradley looked at me coldly and said, "I don't feed extra mouths," then announced he'd gotten me a job at the local grocery store. I smiled and agreed. But when I didn't show up the next day, everything changed. Where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below, and please like and subscribe to hear how I taught my ungrateful son the most important lesson of his life. Teaching was never just a job for me. For 40 years I poured my heart and soul into my classroom at Pinewood Elementary, helping shape the minds and hearts of thousands of children who passed through my second grade class. I still remember most of their names and faces. Many of them are parents themselves now, and occasionally I receive letters or run into former students who tell me how I impacted their lives. There is no greater reward in this profession. My late husband Frank and I had purchased our modest 3-bedroom home when Bradley was just 2 years old. Frank worked as an electrician while I taught, and though we never had much extra, we always made sure Bradley had everything he needed. Frank passed away 3 years ago after a brief but expensive battle with pancreatic cancer. The medical bills depleted our savings, and soon I found that maintaining our home on my teacher's pension and Social Security wasn't sustainable. "You should sell the house," Bradley had suggested during one of his infrequent visits after Frank's funeral. "Property values in your neighborhood have tripled since you bought it. You could make a nice profit." I resisted at first. Every corner of that home held memories. The kitchen where Frank and I danced while washing dishes. The backyard tree where Bradley had his first treehouse. The worn spot on the living room carpet where Frank's recliner sat for 35 years. But practicality eventually won out. My arthritis was making it difficult to maintain the yard, and the property taxes kept increasing. When I finally made the decision to sell, Bradley immediately offered his home. "You can live with us, Mom," he said. "We have plenty of room, and the kids would love having you around." Bradley had done well for himself as a financial advisor. His Tudor-style home in the affluent part of town had 5 bedrooms, a pool, and a perfectly manicured lawn maintained by professional landscapers. His wife Valerie worked part-time as an interior designer, and their children, 12-year-old Zoe and 8-year-old Miles, attended private school. I was excited about living with my family. After Frank died, the silence in our home became oppressive. The thought of being surrounded by the energy of my grandchildren seemed like exactly what I needed. The first indication that things might not be as I imagined came when Bradley helped me move in. Rather than one of the larger empty bedrooms, he had prepared the smallest guest room in the back corner of the house for me. "We need to keep the other rooms available for clients and out-of-town guests," he explained while carrying in one of my suitcases. I noticed he had hired movers for the task rather than helping himself. "Valerie hosts a lot of design clients here, and appearances matter in her business." I nodded and said nothing, grateful to have a place at all. The room was lovely, if small, with just enough space for a twin bed, a small dresser, and a nightstand. Most of my belongings went into storage or were sold along with the house. Looking at my son, I hardly recognized the boy I had raised. Bradley had always been ambitious, but there was a hardness to him now that troubled me. As a child, he'd been sensitive and thoughtful. I remembered how he'd once spent his entire allowance buying soup cans for a school food drive, or how he'd sit with the new kids at lunch so they wouldn't be alone. When had he changed? Was it during college, when he'd fallen in with a crowd of business majors focused solely on future earnings? Or was it later, when he'd married Valerie, whose family had money and social connections that clearly influenced their lifestyle? Valerie was always polite to me, but I felt her watching whenever I interacted with Zoe and Miles. She would swiftly correct the children if they became too loud or excited around me, as though I might be bothered by their energy. In reality, their exuberance was the brightest part of my day. "Grandma, we made a space for your books on our bookshelf," Zoe had exclaimed on my first day, pulling me by the hand to show me the cleared shelf in the family room. "That's not necessary, Zoe," Bradley interjected. "Grandma will keep her things in her room. We don't want to clutter the common areas." The light in Zoe's eyes dimmed, and I quickly assured her that I didn't have many books anyway, which wasn't true. I donated dozens of boxes to the library before moving. I tried to find ways to contribute to the household without being intrusive. I offered to cook dinner several nights a week, but Valerie informed me they had a meal delivery service. I volunteered to drive the kids to school, but they had a carpool arrangement with other families. Even my attempts to help with laundry or cleaning were rebuffed, as they employed a housekeeper who came 3 times weekly. "Just relax and enjoy your retirement, Mom," Bradley would say, though his tone suggested he viewed my lack of contribution as laziness rather than a result of his restrictions. At night, alone in my small room, I would sometimes take out the memory box I'd brought with me. It contained Bradley's handmade Mother's Day cards, his school awards, photographs of us at the beach, at his graduation, at countless ordinary moments throughout his childhood. Had he forgotten all the nights I'd stayed up helping him with school projects? The 3 jobs I worked one summer to buy him a computer for high school? The way his father and I had stretched every dollar to give him opportunities we never had? I didn't expect gratitude exactly, but I had hoped for kindness. My retirement party was held in the school gymnasium, decorated with handmade cards and artwork from current and former students. Principal Garcia gave a touching speech about my years of service, and my colleague Martha, who had taught alongside me for 30 years, presented me with a scrapbook containing photos and notes from hundreds of former students. "You've shaped more lives than you'll ever know, Edith," Martha said, hugging me tightly. "What will you do with all your free time now?" I told her about moving in with Bradley and his family, my voice bright with anticipation. "I'll finally have time to be a proper grandmother." Martha's smile faltered slightly. "That sounds wonderful. But remember, you're still young at heart. Don't lose yourself in just being someone's mother or grandmother." I didn't understand her concern then. I was looking forward to this new chapter, despite the pain of leaving my home. The day the new owners took possession of my house, I stood in the empty living room saying a silent goodbye. Frank and I had brought Bradley home to this house. We had celebrated birthdays, weathered illnesses, argued and reconciled, loved and lived within these walls for over 3 decades. Leaving felt like abandoning Frank's memory somehow. "Mom, the movers are waiting," Bradley called from the doorway, checking his watch impatiently. The small moving truck contained what remained of my life. Some clothing, photo albums, a few pieces of jewelry, and a handful of keepsakes I couldn't bear to part with. Everything else had been sold, donated, or discarded in the rapid downsizing Bradley had insisted upon. "You won't have room for all this at our place," he'd said, sorting through my belongings with ruthless efficiency. "Besides, you can always buy new things if you need them." But it wasn't about needing things. It was about the comfort of familiar objects, the history they represented, the connections to my past they maintained. When we arrived at Bradley's house, Valerie greeted me with a quick hug before returning to a phone call with a client. The movers placed my boxes in the guest room, and Bradley handed them cash before rushing off to a meeting. "Make yourself at home, Mom," he called over his shoulder. "We'll have dinner at 7. Left alone, I slowly unpacked my clothes into the small dresser and closet. There wasn't room for everything, so I kept some items in a suitcase stored under the bed. I arranged a few framed photos on the nightstand and dresser. One of Frank and me on our wedding day, one of Bradley's high school graduation, and one recent picture of Zoe and Miles. The special memory box containing Bradley's childhood items went into the closet. I wasn't ready to look through it yet, not when the contrast between the loving boy he had been and the distant man he had become was so stark. That evening we had our first family dinner together. The dining room table was formally set, and Valerie served an elaborate meal I later learned had been prepared by their personal chef and simply reheated. "So, Mom," Bradley said as he poured himself a glass of expensive wine without offering me any, "have you thought about what you'll do with your time now?" Before I could answer, he continued, "I was talking to a client today about how people often lose their sense of purpose in retirement. He said his father aged 10 years in the first 6 months after retiring, just withered away without a job to give him structure. I don't think that will happen to me," I replied carefully. "I have many interests and projects I've been looking forward to pursuing." "Like what?" Valerie asked, sounding genuinely curious. "Well, I've always wanted to learn watercolor painting, and there's a senior reading program at the library where volunteers read to children. I thought that would be perfect given my background." Bradley frowned slightly. Those sound like hobbies, not real pursuits. You need something more substantial. 40 years of teaching was substantial enough, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I'm looking forward to activities that bring joy rather than responsibility. The conversation shifted as Bradley began talking about a major investment deal he'd recently closed. The pride in his voice was unmistakable as he detailed the commission he'd earned. That's how we're paying for our trip to Europe this summer, he told the children. Hard work and smart decisions pay off. I noticed he didn't mention that his college education, which had launched his career, had been paid for through my hard work and sacrifices. Frank and I had taken no vacations for 8 years to afford Bradley's tuition at a prestigious private university. After dinner, I offered to help with the dishes, but Valerie insisted the housekeeper would handle them in the morning. Everyone retreated to their own activities. Bradley to his home office, Valerie to her design studio, and the children to their rooms for homework. I returned to my small room, feeling oddly like a guest who had overstayed her welcome on the very first night. Later that evening, I overheard Bradley and Valerie talking in their bedroom across the hall. How long do you think she'll be staying? Valerie asked. I don't know. I thought she'd use the house money to get a condo or something, but she barely had anything left after paying off Dad's medical bills and the mortgage. Well, we need to establish some boundaries. Your mother tends to hover. I silently retreated to my room, their words stinging more than they should have. I had been in their home less than 12 hours. How could I already be hovering? That night, I calculated my finances carefully. My teacher's pension and Social Security came to just under $2,000 a month. Rent for even a modest apartment in our area would consume most of that, leaving little for utilities, food, and medical expenses not covered by Medicare. The money from the house had indeed gone primarily to clearing debts, with the remainder set aside for emergencies. I was, for the first time in my adult life, financially dependent on someone else. The realization made my stomach knot with anxiety and shame. 1 week after moving in, I came downstairs for breakfast to find Bradley, Valerie, and the children already seated around the kitchen island. The housekeeper, Rosa, was preparing something that smelled delicious. Good morning, I said cheerfully, taking the empty stool beside Miles, who grinned up at me with a milk mustache. Morning, Grandma, he chirped. Rosa's making French toast. That sounds wonderful, I replied, gratefully accepting the cup of coffee Rosa placed before me. Bradley was reading something on his tablet, barely glancing up to acknowledge my presence. Valerie was reviewing what appeared to be fabric swatches, while simultaneously reminding Zoe about a dance recital that afternoon. Mom, Bradley said suddenly, setting down his tablet. We need to discuss your situation. The kitchen fell quiet. Even Rosa paused in her cooking, before discreetly moving to wipe down counters in the adjacent pantry. My situation? I asked, confused. Your financial situation, he clarified. I've been looking at your numbers and frankly your pension is inadequate. You should have planned better for retirement. I felt heat rise to my face. Your father's illness took most of our savings, Bradley, and teachers' pensions aren't exactly generous. He waved away my explanation. Regardless, the issue now is that you're not contributing to this household. Valerie and I have discussed it, and we feel it sets a poor example for the children. Valerie at least had the grace to look uncomfortable, studying her coffee cup intently. I've offered to help around the house, I began, but Bradley interrupted. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about financial contribution. He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. I don't feed extra mouths that aren't pulling their weight. The kitchen went utterly still. Miles looked confused while Zoe's eyes widened in shock. Valerie closed her eyes briefly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Bradley, she hissed. What? It's a principle I've always been clear about, he replied defensively. Everyone contributes according to their ability. It's how I was raised. I sat frozen, the coffee cup halfway to my lips. Had my son just referred to me as an extra mouth to feed? The same son whose diapers I had changed, whose nightmares I had soothed, whose college tuition I had sacrificed vacations and new clothes and dining out to pay for. Fortunately, Bradley continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension, I've found a solution. Gerald Watson, you remember him from high school? He manages the Sunshine Grocery on Maple Street. They need a part-time cashier, and I've arranged for you to start tomorrow. You what? I finally managed, setting down my cup before my trembling hands could spill it. It's perfect. 20 hours a week minimum wage plus employee discount. It will give you something to do, and you can contribute to household expenses. He looked pleased with himself, as though he'd done me an enormous favor. Zoe spoke up, her voice small. But Grandma just retired. She worked for a really long time already. That's different, honey, Bradley explained condescendingly. Grandma was a teacher. This is just a simple job to keep her active and give her some spending money. Just a simple job, I repeated softly, 40 years of education and child development expertise dismissed in a single phrase. The shift starts at 9 tomorrow, Bradley continued. I'll drive you on my way to the office. I looked around the table. Valerie was still avoiding eye contact. Zoe looked upset, while Miles appeared confused by the adult tension. And Bradley was watching me expectantly, waiting for my gratitude. Thank you for thinking of me, I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. That sounds fine. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I barely heard them. I excused myself as soon as possible, retreating to my room where I could finally let the tears fall. How had it come to this? My son, my only child whom I had raised with love and sacrifice, now saw me as a burden, an extra mouth to feed. The humiliation burned deep, made worse by the fact that it had happened in front of my grandchildren. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up grading papers after Bradley was in bed, the summers I'd worked at the community pool as a lifeguard, and at the mall as a sales clerk to afford his baseball camp and new school clothes. The used car I drove for 15 years because replacing it would have meant less money for his education. Frank and I had never complained about these sacrifices. We had made them willingly, proudly even, investing in our son's future. And now, that same son saw no value in me beyond my ability to contribute financially to his already comfortable lifestyle. When my tears finally subsided, I called Martha. We had been colleagues and friends for decades, and if anyone would understand, it would be her. He said what? Martha's outrage was immediate and validating. Edith, that's horrible. How dare he speak to you that way? I don't know what to do, I admitted. I don't have enough money to live independently right now. You come stay with me, Martha insisted. I have a spare bedroom just sitting empty since Michael moved out. You know you're welcome anytime. Michael was Martha's son who had recently relocated to Seattle for work. Unlike Bradley, he called his mother weekly and visited whenever possible. That's very kind, I said. But I don't want to lose access to Zoe and Miles. They're the bright spot in this situation. Honey, do you really want them seeing their father treat you this way? What lesson does that teach them about respecting their elders or taking care of family? Her question gave me pause. What values was I modeling by accepting Bradley's disrespect? Let me think about it, I told her. I'm supposed to start this job tomorrow. Maybe things will improve once I'm contributing financially. And maybe pigs will fly, Martha retorted. But my offer stands. Day or night, you call me if you need an escape hatch. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about the next day's humiliation. At 65, with arthritis in my knees and back, I would be standing at a checkout counter scanning groceries for people who might very well have been my former students or their parents. It wasn't that I considered such work beneath me. I had worked plenty of retail and service jobs in my youth and during summers as a teacher. It was the context that stung. Being forced into it by my son who saw me as a financial burden rather than a mother who had given everything for him. Something needed to change. I just wasn't sure what or how. Despite my inner turmoil, I was determined to face the next day with dignity. I opened my closet to find something appropriate to wear for my first day as a grocery cashier. Most of my wardrobe consisted of comfortable retirement clothes or the professional attire I'd worn as a teacher. Nothing seemed quite right for this new role. I'll need to go shopping, I murmured to myself. I checked my wallet. I had exactly $73 in cash and a credit card with a small available balance. It would have to do. I called a cab to take me to the nearby discount store, not wanting to ask Bradley or Valerie for a ride. At the store, I selected 2 pairs of black pants and 3 modest tops that seemed suitable for cashier work. The total came to just over $60, leaving me with barely enough for the cab ride home. Another small humiliation in a growing collection. When I returned, Bradley was in the kitchen talking on his phone. He raised an eyebrow at my shopping bags. "Where did you go?" he asked after ending his call. "I needed some appropriate clothes for the job tomorrow," I explained. He frowned. "You should have asked me for a ride. You were working. I didn't want to disturb you. Still, taking a cab is expensive. You need to be more careful with money, Mom." The irony of being lectured about financial responsibility by the son who had benefited from my careful budgeting his entire life was not lost on me. I simply nodded and headed upstairs. As I was hanging up my new clothes, Zoe appeared in the doorway. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" Her expression was troubled. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." She sat on the edge of my bed, fidgeting with a friendship bracelet on her wrist. "Why does Dad want you to work at the grocery store? Aren't you supposed to be retired?" I chose my words carefully. "Your father thinks it would be good for me to stay active and contribute to the household expenses." "But you're his mom," Zoe said, confusion evident in her young face. "My friend Sophia's grandma lives with them, and she doesn't have to work. She makes cookies and takes Sophia shopping and stuff." "Every family is different," I said gently, not wanting to criticize Bradley to his daughter. "And every situation is unique." "It doesn't seem fair," Zoe persisted. "You worked for a really long time already. Dad says we need to respect our elders, but then he says you have to work more." Out of the mouths of babes. Zoe's simple observation cut to the heart of the contradiction in Bradley's behavior. "Sometimes adults are complicated," I told her, sitting beside her and putting an arm around her shoulders. "But I want you to know that respect is very important. Respect for yourself and for others, regardless of their age or what they can do for you." Zoe leaned against me. "I respect you, Grandma. And I don't care if you buy groceries or make cookies or anything. I just like having you here." Her words warmed my heart more than she could know. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me." After Zoe left, I found myself drawn to the memory box in my closet. I opened it and began sorting through the contents. Bradley's report cards, sports ribbons, drawings, and birthday cards he had made for me over the years. One card in particular caught my eye. It was from his 16th birthday, when we had scraped together enough to buy him a used car. The outside had a simple drawing of the car, and inside he had written, "Mom, thank you for always putting me first. Your sacrifices never go unnoticed. I promise to make you proud and take care of you someday the way you've always taken care of me. Love always, Bradley." I traced my finger over his teenage handwriting, so earnest and grateful. Where had that boy gone? At what point had financial success and status symbols become more important to him than compassion and family loyalty? As evening approached, my arthritis began flaring up, a common occurrence when I was stressed. My knees throbbed and my lower back ached as I made my way downstairs for dinner. The thought of standing for hours at a checkout counter tomorrow made me wince. Dinner was a quiet affair. Bradley talked about his day at the office, Valerie discussed an interior design client, and the children shared brief updates about school. No one asked about my day or my thoughts on starting work tomorrow. As we were finishing dessert, I cleared my throat. "Bradley, what time will we need to leave in the morning to get to the grocery store? I can drop you at 8:30. Your shift starts at 9, right?" I nodded. "I'll pick you up at 1 after your shift ends," he continued. "Gerald said they'd start you with half days this week, then move to full shifts next week." "Thank you," I said, though inside I was calculating how I would manage 8-hour shifts on my feet with my arthritis. Teachers at least could sit occasionally throughout the day. "It's no problem," Bradley replied, his tone suggesting he was doing me a tremendous favor. "I'm glad to help you get back on your feet financially." I bit back the response that rose to my lips, that I wouldn't need getting back on my feet if I hadn't spent decades putting him first. Instead, I simply smiled and excused myself from the table. That night, as I laid in bed trying to find a position that didn't aggravate my aching joints, I thought about Bradley teaching me to drive when he was 17. How patient and encouraging he had been, never getting frustrated when I ground the gears or brake too suddenly. How we had laughed together when I finally mastered parallel parking. How proud I had been to have raised such a kind, patient young man. The contrast with the cold, judgmental person he had become was heartbreaking. Yet as I drifted off to sleep, something Martha had said kept echoing in my mind. What lesson does that teach them about respecting their elders or taking care of family? What lesson indeed? And who was the teacher here, if not me? I barely slept that night. My mind kept cycling through memories, possibilities, and difficult emotions. By the time my alarm went off at 6:30, I had made a decision. I dressed carefully in my new black pants and a navy blue top, styled my silver hair neatly, and applied light makeup. When I came downstairs, Bradley was already at the kitchen island with his coffee and tablet. "You look nice, Mom," he said, seeming mildly surprised. "Thank you. Teaching taught me the importance of making a good first impression." I ate a small breakfast, my stomach too knotted with anticipation to manage much. Bradley finished his coffee and stood. "Ready to go? We should leave now to make sure you're not late on your first day." The drive to Sunshine Grocery was quiet. Bradley fiddled with the radio while I watched the familiar streets of my hometown pass by. This was the community where I had taught for 40 years, where people still stopped me in stores to tell me I had taught them or their children. And now I would be serving them in a completely different capacity. "Here we are," Bradley announced, pulling up to the storefront. "Good luck today. I'll pick you up at 1. "Thank you," I said, gathering my purse. Then on impulse I added, "I love you, Bradley." He seemed startled, then gave me an awkward pat on the arm. "You too, Mom. Have a good day." Inside the store, I introduced myself to the first employee I saw, who directed me to the manager's office. Gerald Watson was a balding man in his 40s who greeted me with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mrs. Wilson, welcome to Sunshine Grocery. Bradley spoke highly of your work ethic." "Thank you for the opportunity," I replied, though we both knew there was nothing high-level about the position. I was a favor to a valued customer, nothing more. Gerald's discomfort was evident as he showed me around the store. He kept glancing at me sideways, clearly wondering why a woman my age was starting an entry-level job. "Usually our cashiers are high school or college kids," he explained as he demonstrated the register system. "But we're short-staffed right now, so your experience will be helpful." The training was straightforward. I picked up the register system quickly, having always been adaptable with technology despite my age. Gerald seemed relieved by this, perhaps having expected me to struggle. "You'll be on Register 3 this morning," he said. "Donna will be next to you on Register 2 if you have any questions." Donna was a pleasant woman in her 30s who gave me a friendly nod as I took my position. The first 2 hours passed in a blur of scanning items, making small talk with customers, and trying to ignore the growing pain in my knees and back. Around 11, a familiar face appeared in my line. Jennifer Adams had been a student in my very first class of second graders, nearly 40 years ago. She was now a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. "Mrs. Wilson?" she asked incredulously. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Jennifer," I replied, continuing to scan her groceries. "How are you?" "I'm fine, but what are you doing here?" "I thought you were a teacher at Pinewood." "I retired last week," I explained, trying to maintain my dignity. "This is my new adventure." Jennifer looked concerned. "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I assured her, though the lie felt heavy on my tongue. "Just keeping busy in retirement." She didn't seem convinced but didn't press further. As I handed her the receipt, she touched my hand briefly. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Wilson. You were my favorite teacher, you know. You made me feel smart when everyone else made me feel stupid because of my dyslexia." Her words brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you, Jennifer. That means a great deal to me." After she left, I checked my watch. It was nearly noon, my designated lunch break. I approached Gerald and asked for permission to step away. "Of course," he said. "Break room's in the back. 30 minutes. But instead of heading to the break room, I walked straight out the front door. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, taking deep breaths of the spring air, feeling a weight lifting from my shoulders with each exhale. Then I walked to the bus stop across the street. According to the schedule posted there, a bus would arrive in 7 minutes that would take me within a few blocks of Martha's house. I had exactly $12 in my wallet, enough for the fare. As the bus approached, I felt a moment of doubt. Was I overreacting? Should I give Bradley more time to adjust to having me in his home? Was I abandoning my grandchildren? But then Bradley's cold words echoed in my mind. I don't feed extra mouths. And I stepped onto the bus. 20 minutes later, I rang Martha's doorbell. She opened it, still in her bathrobe and slippers, her gray hair wrapped in a towel. Her eyes widened at the sight of me in my cashier outfit. Edith, what on earth? I took your advice, I said simply. Is that escape hatch still available? Martha pulled me into a fierce hug. Always.
Come in.
Tell me everything. Over cups of tea at her kitchen table, I recounted the morning's events and my impulsive decision to leave the grocery store. I just couldn't do it, Martha. Not because the work was beneath me, but because the context was so demeaning. I spent my entire career helping children grow into thoughtful, respectful adults. And somehow, I failed with my own son. You did not fail, Martha said firmly. Bradley made his own choices as an adult. And right now, you're teaching him another valuable lesson about consequences. What do you mean? You're showing him that you won't be treated as a burden or a charity case. That you have dignity and self-respect that can't be bought or sold for room and board. I hadn't thought of it that way, but Martha was right. This wasn't just about escaping an uncomfortable situation. It was about setting boundaries with my adult son and teaching him about respect, just as I would have done when he was a child. What will you do now? Martha asked. I don't know, I admitted. I can't afford my own place yet. I might need to stay with you for a little while, if that's really okay. It's more than okay, Martha assured me. Michael's room is just gathering dust, and I've been rattling around this house by myself for too long. Stay as long as you like. We spent the afternoon making up the bed in her spare room and clearing space in the closet for my few belongings, which we would need to retrieve from Bradley's house eventually. Martha lent me some comfortable clothes to change into, and I felt myself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Bradley will be waiting at the store at 1 o'clock, I realized suddenly. He'll be furious when he finds out I left. Let him be furious, Martha said. He needs to understand that his actions have consequences. I should at least let him know I'm safe, I said, reaching for my phone. That's your choice, Martha replied. But I wouldn't tell him where you are just yet. Give yourself some time to think and plan before you face him. I considered this, then sent a brief text message. I've decided not to continue at the grocery store. I am safe and staying with a friend. I'll be in touch soon about collecting my things. Almost immediately, my phone began ringing. Bradley's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, then turned off my phone entirely. That's a good first step, Martha said approvingly. Now let's think about what comes next. Over dinner, we discussed my options. Martha's suggestion that I stay with her long-term was tempting, but I worried about being a burden to her as well. Don't be ridiculous, she scoffed. My pension is better than yours because I was department head, and this house is paid off. Having you contribute to utilities and groceries would actually help me. And more importantly, I'd love the company. The idea of sharing a home with my dear friend, supporting each other through our retirement years, had a certain appeal. It would give me independence from Bradley, while still providing the companionship I had hoped for when I sold my house. Let me think about it, I said. But for now, yes, I'm grateful to stay here while I sort things out. And what about Bradley? Martha asked. What do you want to happen there? I sighed. I love my son, despite everything. And I adore my grandchildren. I don't want to lose those relationships. But something needs to change. Bradley needs to understand that respecting me isn't conditional on my financial contribution. Then that's the lesson you need to teach him, Martha said simply. And if there's anyone qualified to teach a difficult lesson with patience and wisdom, it's you, Edith Wilson. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of purpose and direction. This wasn't the retirement I had planned, but perhaps it was the one I needed. Not just for myself, but for my son and grandchildren as well. Bradley called 17 times that first day. I know because Martha kept count, looking at my silent phone with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. By evening, he had started leaving voicemails, his tone evolving from angry to worried. "Mom, where are you? Gerald said you just walked out. This is incredibly unprofessional. Call me back immediately. Mom, this isn't funny. I'm waiting at the grocery store. Where did you go? Mom, Valerie and the kids are getting worried. At least let us know you're okay. Mom, please. I don't understand what's happening. Just call me back." I listened to each message but didn't respond beyond my initial text. Martha was right. I needed time to gather my thoughts and strength before confronting Bradley. And perhaps he needed time too, time to reflect on his behavior and its consequences. The next morning, Bradley began calling Martha and my other friends and former colleagues. Fortunately, Martha had already alerted those most likely to hear from him, asking them to respect my privacy while assuring Bradley I was safe. She fielded his call with calm professionalism. "Yes, Bradley, I've spoken with your mother. No, I won't tell you where she is right now. She's a grown woman making her own choices, and she'll contact you when she's ready." According to Martha, he didn't take this well. He spluttered something about elder care and responsibilities. I reminded him that you're 65, not 95, and perfectly capable of managing your own affairs. On the third day, Martha returned from grocery shopping with an interesting report. "I ran into Valerie at the store. She seemed genuinely concerned about you." "What did she say?" I asked. "She asked if I'd heard from you and seemed relieved when I said you were okay. Then she said something interesting. She said, 'I want Edith to know that not everyone in our house agreed with how things were handled.'" That surprised me. Valerie had always seemed to follow Bradley's lead, particularly regarding household decisions. Perhaps there had been more disagreement behind the scenes than I realized. "She also mentioned that the children miss you," Martha added. "Especially Zoe. Apparently she's been quite upset about your departure." That pierced my heart. The last thing I wanted was to cause my grandchildren distress. "Maybe I should call them," I said uncertainly. "That's your decision," Martha replied. "But remember, part of what you're teaching Bradley is that actions have consequences not just for himself, but for his entire family." Meanwhile, my life at Martha's settled into a pleasant routine. Her home was smaller than Bradley's but far more welcoming. We took morning walks in the neighborhood, prepared meals together, and spent evenings watching old movies or playing cards. I began to feel like myself again, my confidence slowly rebuilding. On the fourth day, Martha returned from checking her mail with an odd expression. Bradley was parked across the street watching the house. "Did he approach you?" I asked, alarmed.
No.
When he saw me notice him, he drove away. "I think he's figured out where you are but isn't sure how to proceed." Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Martha peered through the peephole, then turned to me with raised eyebrows. "It's Bradley. Do you want to see him?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, but I'd like you to stay nearby if you don't mind." When Martha opened the door, Bradley stood on the porch looking disheveled and tired, nothing like his usual polished self. His eyes darted past Martha, searching for me. "Is my mother here?" he asked, his voice strained. Martha stepped aside, revealing me sitting calmly in an armchair in her living room. The relief on Bradley's face was immediate and genuine. "Mom! Thank God. I've been worried sick." "I told you I was safe," I replied evenly. "You can't just disappear like that," he exclaimed, stepping into the house without being invited. "Do you have any idea what you put us through? The kids are upset, Valerie's concerned, and I've had to reschedule client meetings to look for you." His focus on the disruption to his schedule rather than my well-being was telling. Martha caught my eye with a knowing look before excusing herself to the kitchen, still within earshot. "Sit down, Bradley," I said, gesturing to the sofa across from me. He seemed taken aback by my calm authority but complied. "Mom, what is this about? Why did you leave the job? Why did you leave our house without talking to me first?" "I think you know why," I said quietly. "Or at least you should." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Is this about what I said at breakfast? About extra mouths to feed? That was just an expression. Was it?" Or was it a reflection of how you truly see me, as a burden rather than as your mother? Of course I see you as my mother. That's why I opened my home to you, why I found you a job, why I've been driving all over town looking for you for 3 days. You opened your home to me, I acknowledged, but made it clear I wasn't really welcome unless I contributed financially. You found me a job without asking if that's what I wanted or needed in my retirement. And you've been looking for me because my absence is inconvenient and embarrassing for you. Not because you're concerned about my happiness. Bradley's face flushed. That's not fair. I've been trying to help you.
No, Bradley.
You've been trying to manage me, to fit me into your life in a way that doesn't disrupt your routine or your image. That's not the same as helping. He started to respond, then stopped, seeming to finally hear what I was saying. After a moment, he asked in a quieter voice, "Why didn't you just talk to me about how you were feeling? Would you have listened? Really listened? Because when I tried to tell you about my retirement plans, you dismissed them as just hobbies. When I offered to help around the house, you said it wasn't enough. You made it clear that my value in your home was tied to my financial contribution. Nothing else." Bradley stared at his hands. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Perhaps not intentionally. But that's what your words and actions communicated." I leaned forward slightly. "Bradley, do you remember when you were in college and needed money for books? Who sent it to you?" "You and Dad," he answered automatically. "And when you needed a suit for your first job interview. When your car broke down senior year. When you wanted to take Valerie to that expensive restaurant to propose. You helped with all of that," he admitted. "But that was different. You were working then. And now I've worked for 40 years and need to rest my body and mind. Does that make me worthless? Does that erase everything I've done for you throughout your life?" He didn't answer, but I could see conflict in his expression. For the first time, he seemed to be truly considering my perspective. "Did you look in the memory box in my room?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "After you left, I was searching for clues about where you might have gone. I found the cards I made you and the photos and the financial records." "What financial records?" "The receipts from my college tuition payments. The loan you and Dad took out against the house to pay for my final year when the scholarship fell through. The letter declining the teaching opportunity in California, because it would have meant moving me in senior year." His voice grew quieter with each example. "I had no idea you kept all that. Not to hold over your head," I clarified. "But because those sacrifices were important moments in our family story. They were choices we made out of love, not obligation." "I'm starting to understand that," Bradley said, looking truly humbled for the first time since I'd moved in with him.
Mom, I'm sorry.
"I've been thinking about money and status for so long that I forgot about the things that really matter." His apology seemed sincere, but I needed to be sure he truly understood. "Bradley, do you know what hurt most about your extra mouth's comment?" He shook his head. "It was hearing it in front of Zoe and Miles. What lesson do you think that taught them about how to treat family? About how they should expect to treat you when you're older?" The color drained from his face. "I didn't think about that." "No, you didn't. But they did." Zoe came to me afterward, confused about why her father would make her grandmother work at a grocery store when other grandmothers get to bake cookies and spend time with their grandchildren. Bradley winced. "She's been asking about you constantly." "They both have." "I miss them terribly," I admitted. "But I couldn't stay in a situation where I was being disrespected and devalued. What kind of example would that set?" "Will you come back?" he asked hesitantly. "We can work something out. A different arrangement." I shook my head. "Not right now, Bradley. I need some time and space to think about what I want for this chapter of my life. And frankly, you need some time to reflect on your values and priorities." He looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand. Can I at least tell the kids you're okay, and that you love them?" "Of course. And I'd like to see them soon, perhaps this weekend if that's all right with you and Valerie." "Absolutely," he agreed quickly. "They'd love that." As he stood to leave, he paused. "Mom, for what it's worth, I am truly sorry. I lost sight of what's important. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring everything and everyone by their financial value, rather than their human worth. Recognition is the first step toward change," I told him, the teacher in me emerging naturally. What matters now is what you do with that recognition. After Bradley left, Martha emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. That went well, she observed, settling beside me on the sofa. You were magnificent, by the way. Clear, firm, but loving. Do you think it made a difference? I asked.
Ido.
He looked like a man who's had his worldview thoroughly shaken. That's not comfortable, but it's necessary for growth. I sipped my tea, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the relationship that had been damaged, hope for what it might become, and pride in myself for standing up for my dignity and worth. The road ahead wasn't entirely clear, but for the first time in weeks, I felt I was traveling in the right direction. 3 days after Bradley's visit, Martha and I were preparing lunch when the doorbell rang. We exchanged glances, both wondering if Bradley had returned. Instead, we found Valerie standing on the porch, looking somewhat nervous. "Hello, Edith," she said. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," I replied, genuinely surprised to see her. "Please come in." Martha made a discreet exit to give us privacy, though I suspected she wouldn't go far. Valerie perched awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "I wanted to check on you," she began, "and to apologize for my part in what happened." "Your part?" I asked. She sighed. "I should have spoken up when Bradley made that horrible comment about extra mouths. I should have made it clear that wasn't how I felt about you living with us." "I appreciate that, Valerie. But may I ask, how did you feel about me living with you?" She considered this carefully before answering. "Honestly, I was nervous. Bradley always described you as very involved in his life. I worried you'd judge my parenting or take over the household." "I see," I said, understanding dawning. "So you were relieved when Bradley established those strict boundaries." "Initially, yes," she admitted. "But then I saw how he was treating you, and it made me uncomfortable. That wasn't what I wanted. I just wanted space to be the mother and wife in my own home." Her honesty was refreshing, and I found myself appreciating her perspective. "I never intended to take over your role, Valerie. I was just hoping to be part of the family." "I realize that now," she said. "And the children miss you terribly. Especially Zoe. She's furious with her father." "I don't want that," I said quickly. "Despite everything, Bradley is still my son, and I love him. I don't want to come between him and his children." "Bradley told us about your conversation," Valerie continued. "About the sacrifices you made for him and how he'd lost perspective. I've never seen him so reflective." This was encouraging news. Perhaps Bradley's remorse went deeper than I'd initially thought. "He's been different since you left," Valerie added. "He's spending more time with the kids, asking about their day, really listening. And he's been going through old photo albums in your memory box every night." "Change takes time," I said cautiously. "But I'm glad to hear he's reflecting." "Would you consider coming back?" Valerie asked. "Not necessarily to live with us if you're happier here with Martha, but to be part of our lives again." "I'd like that very much," I said sincerely. "But there would need to be some clear understandings about mutual respect." "Of course," she agreed quickly. "In fact, Bradley wanted me to ask if you'd be willing to meet with all of us maybe this weekend? To talk things through as a family." I considered this. I wasn't entirely ready to face Bradley again, but I desperately wanted to see my grandchildren, and if there was a genuine opportunity to heal this rift, I should embrace it. "Saturday would work," I said finally, "but I'd prefer neutral ground. Perhaps the park near your house." "Perfect," Valerie smiled, seeming relieved. "Shall we say 11 o'clock? We could bring a picnic lunch." After Valerie left, Martha reappeared with a knowing smile. "Family meeting at the park? How did you know?" "It's what I would have suggested," she replied. "Neutral territory, public enough to encourage good behavior, relaxed enough for real conversation. Will you come with me?" I asked. Martha shook her head. "This is something you need to do as a family, but I'll be right here when you get back, ready to hear all about it." Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunny and mild. Martha helped me select an outfit that was both comfortable and confidence-boosting. a lovely lavender blouse with white pants and comfortable walking shoes. "Remember," she said as I prepared to leave, "you're not going there to beg for reconciliation. You're setting terms for a healthy relationship moving forward. You deserve respect, Edith. Don't settle for less." Bradley had offered to pick me up, but I chose to take a taxi to maintain my independence. When I arrived at the park, I spotted them immediately. Bradley and Valerie setting up a picnic blanket while Zoe and Miles played nearby. Zoe saw me first. "Grandma!" she shrieked, abandoning her game to race toward me. Miles followed close behind, and I knelt to embrace them both, my heart swelling with love. "We missed you so much," Zoe said, clinging to me. "Dad said you needed some quiet time," Miles added. "Did you get enough quiet now?" I laughed. "Yes, sweetheart. I think I did." Bradley approached slowly, looking uncertain. He had lost the slick, confident demeanor I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Today he seemed more like the thoughtful boy I remembered raising. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for arranging this," I replied. Valerie suggested the children play on the nearby playground while the adults talked. Once they were out of earshot, Bradley turned to me with genuine emotion in his eyes. "Mom, I've spent the last week thinking about everything you said, and you were right. I treated you terribly, and there's no excuse for it." "I appreciate that, Bradley. I've been trying to understand how I became so transactional about relationships, measuring everything by financial contribution or status." He shook his head. "That's not how you and Dad raised me." "No, it's not," I agreed. "Your father and I taught you that family supports each other, not because of what they can get in return, but because that's what love means." "I remember that," he said quietly. "I don't know when I lost sight of it. Maybe when I started in finance, or when I began making more money than my colleagues. Success changed me, and not for the better. Recognition is the first step toward change." I repeated my earlier words. "That's what I'm trying to do now," he said earnestly. "Change. Be the son you deserve, the father my children need." Valerie reached over and squeezed his hand supportively. "We've been having a lot of conversations about family values," she added. "About what we want Zoe and Miles to learn from us." "And what have you concluded?" I asked. "That respect isn't conditional," Bradley answered. "That we need to model the behavior we want to see in our children. And that family supports each other through all stages of life, not just when it's convenient." His words sounded sincere, and the humility in his expression suggested real reflection had occurred. Still, I needed to be clear about my own boundaries. "I appreciate your insights, Bradley, and I do believe you're sincere. But I need you to understand that I won't be moving back into your home." He looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand. I betrayed your trust, and it will take time to rebuild it." "It's not just that," I explained. "Living with Martha has made me realize I need my own space and independence at this stage of my life. She's offered to rent me her spare room long term, and I've decided to accept." "Are you sure? We could convert the office into a proper suite for you, with your own entrance and kitchenette." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "This arrangement gives me the independence I need while still providing companionship. Martha and I get along wonderfully, and we're already talking about splitting the gardening and cooking based on our preferences." "If that's what makes you happy, then I support it," Bradley said, though I could tell he was still hoping I'd change my mind. "But I hope you'll still be part of our lives. The children need their grandmother. And I need them," I assured him. "I'm not cutting ties with any of you. I'm just establishing healthier boundaries." "What would that look like?" Valerie asked practically. "Regular visits, perhaps Sunday dinners. Maybe I could pick up the children from school one day a week and spend time with them until you get home from work. I'd love to attend their school events and recitals." "All of that sounds wonderful," Valerie said warmly. "And maybe you could stay overnight occasionally? The children would love breakfast with Grandma." We spent the next hour working out a schedule that respected everyone's needs and boundaries. By the time we called the children back for lunch, I felt cautiously optimistic about this new arrangement. As we ate, Zoe asked the question that had clearly been on her mind. "Grandma, are you coming back to live with us?" "No, sweetheart," I said gently. I'm going to be living with my friend Martha. But I'll see you very often, I promise. But why? Miles asked. Don't you like living with us? I looked at Bradley, silently asking permission to be honest. He nodded slightly. I love you all very much, I began carefully. But sometimes adults need their own space just like you need your own rooms. Martha and I are good friends and we enjoy living together. But I'll still be part of your lives, just in a different way. Like how Braden's parents are divorced but his dad still comes to all his baseball games? Zoe asked, trying to understand. Similar to that, yes. Different living arrangements but still family. Bradley cleared his throat. Kids, the truth is I didn't make Grandma feel welcome in our home. I made some mistakes that hurt her feelings, and that's why she needed to leave. I was touched by his honesty with the children. Did you say sorry? Miles asked with the straightforward logic of an 8-year-old. I did, Bradley replied. But sometimes saying sorry isn't enough. Sometimes you need to show you're sorry by changing your behavior. That's what I'm working on now. Are you still mad at Dad? Zoe asked me. No, sweetheart. I'm not mad. I'm proud of him for recognizing his mistakes and trying to do better. That takes courage. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly. We walked around the pond, fed the ducks, and played an impromptu game of frisbee. By the time we parted, plans were in place for me to spend the following Friday evening with the children while Bradley and Valerie attended a work function. Bradley walked me to my taxi. Mom, thank you for giving us this chance. I promise things will be different going forward. I believe you, I said, and I meant it. We all make mistakes, Bradley. What matters is how we learn from them. I've been thinking about what you said about the lessons I'm teaching Zoe and Miles. You were right. I don't want them growing up thinking people's value is tied to their productivity or financial contribution. That's a powerful realization. I'm working on it, he said. It's not easy changing patterns of thinking that have become so ingrained, but seeing myself through their eyes, and through yours, has been illuminating. I reached up to touch his cheek, a maternal gesture I hadn't made in years. You're still learning and growing. Even at 42. We all are. That's the beauty of life. As the taxi pulled away, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't the retirement I had planned, but perhaps it was the one I needed. I had stood up for my dignity and worth, established healthy boundaries, and in doing so, possibly helped my son become a better person and parent. 6 months later, my life had found a new and satisfying rhythm. Martha and I had settled into a comfortable routine as housemates, each with our own space but plenty of shared activities and companionship. I'd begun volunteering at the Literacy Center 3 mornings a week, using my teaching skills to help adults learning to read. The work was fulfilling without being exhausting, perfect for this chapter of my life. Bradley had kept his word about maintaining our relationship. Sunday dinners at his house became a cherished tradition, and I often spent time with Zoe and Miles after school. More importantly, I'd seen genuine changes in Bradley's behavior and attitudes. He spoke less about money and status, listened more to his children's thoughts and feelings, and treated Valerie with greater consideration. One Sunday evening, as we finished dinner and the children cleared the table, Bradley turned to me with a serious expression. Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something. I turned down a promotion at work last month. You did? Why? I thought becoming senior partner was your goal. It was, he admitted. But it would have meant 60-hour weeks and frequent travel. I realized I was about to make the same mistake I've seen colleagues make, sacrificing family time for career advancement. That's a significant decision, I observed. Are you at peace with it? He smiled, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Completely. The old me would have jumped at the title and the salary increase without considering the cost. But I've learned that some things are more valuable than money or status. Like being present for Miles's baseball games and Zoe's dance recitals. Like having family dinners most nights instead of working late. Like having time to really listen when Valerie tells me about her day. His words filled me with quiet joy. This was the son I had raised, the one who understood that life's true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars. I'm proud of you, I told him sincerely. That kind of wisdom doesn't come easily. I had a good teacher, he replied, meeting my eyes meaningfully. It just took me a while to remember the lessons. As I reflect on this journey, I realize that retirement hasn't diminished my role as a teacher at all. It simply changed my classroom and my students. By standing up for my dignity and worth, I taught my son about respect and boundaries. By refusing to be valued solely for my financial contribution, I taught my grandchildren about unconditional love and the true meaning of family. And by creating a new life that honors my needs and boundaries, I taught myself that it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself with family members, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to be reminded of their own worth beyond what they can provide financially. Remember, your value as a human being has never been tied to your productivity or earning potential. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you always have the courage to teach others how to treat you with dignity and respect.